Hi, I'm Victor. I'm the founder of Serverpod. For those of you that have not yet heard about Serverpod, it's a new backend framework made for the Flutter community. It's written in Dart and has many innovative features, like code generation and type database communication, making it faster to write your backend code. It's really the missing server for Flutter. In this video, I want to give a quick update on our progress in bringing Serverpod to its 1.0 release. I'm hoping to do an update about once a month to keep you up to date, but no promises. Our top priority is of course to finish the 1.0 release as fast as possible. Since this is the first video update, I thought I wanted to start by briefly introducing Serverpod and its basic principles. In the second part of the video, I'll talk a little bit more about what we're currently working on and give a very first demo of the companion app. In the Flying High with Flutter podcast, I got a bit of heat for saying that Serverpod has world-class logging. I know it's a bold claim, but stick around for the demo. I think it will blow your mind. I've been working with building Flutter apps since before Flutter was even officially released. Before that, I worked at Google on the Flutter team. I love Flutter. I love how fast it is to build apps and how easy it is to get them to the different platforms. But something that always bothered me was how hard it is to create the backends for the apps. I had to deal with different computer languages, keep the communication protocol synchronized, and use different tools for database communication and caching of data. It's a jungle to say the least, and we're not talking about a fun jungle with colorful parrots and incredible animals, but more of a jungle full of mosquitoes, poisonous snakes and mud. And don't get me started about Firebase. Sure, it's easy to get going, but it quickly gets very expensive and it's hard to maintain a good architecture over time. Clearly, there's a need for a better backend for Flutter developers. And this is how the idea for Serverpod was born. The goal with Serverpod is to make the framework as easy as possible to work with while still not adding any limitations. It's opinionated in the sense that we picked Postgres for the database, but it allows Serverpod to do some really cool stuff that other frameworks simply cannot do. One example is that Serverpod can pull a row from the database and pass it straight to the client. It automatically handles all serialization, works with null safety, and you can even mask out data that should never be sent to the client, like passwords. Another example is what we call future calls. A future call allows you to call a method sometime in the future. Say you want to send an email to a user 1 week after they signed up. Just make a future call. Serverpod will save the call to the database, so it will be executed even if the server restarts. So, how does Serverpod work? To get started, you must have Flutter, of course, and Docker Desktop installed. Docker will handle all the nitty-gritty details of managing your database. With Flutter and Docker installed, you can install the Serverpod command line tool. I'm not going to go through the installation in detail, but on docs.serverpod.dev you can find all the information you need. You create a new project by running the serverpod create command. It will set up your server, a Dart package with your client code, and the Flutter app ready to communicate with the server. It will also create a Docker container with the database and the Redis installation. The database will have a default set of tables used internally by Serverpod. Now you can run your server by starting the Docker container and then running the server locally. The day you want to deploy your server to the cloud, we provide Terraform scripts, making it super easy to do so. To use Serverpod as a REST server, where you send queries to the server and wait for a response, it's a breeze. You just add a new method to one of your server's endpoints and you run the Serverpod generate command. Serverpod will analyze your server code and automatically generate your client code. Calling the server method is as easy as calling a local method. Here we have a hello method in our example endpoint. And we can call it from our Flutter app just by calling the client.example.hello method. To make serializable objects, you define these in easy-to-read YAML files. Serverpod will use these files to generate Dart classes, complete with serialization code and database bindings. You can specify database indexes or other relationships directly in the YAML files. You can also stream data if you're developing an app with real-time communication. I'm not going to cover this in this video, but future videos and tutorials will explore this in depth. In addition, Serverpod covers everything you would expect from a modern server framework. You can do file uploads, authenticate with Apple or Google, and monitor your server in real time while it's running. Next, I want to say a word about the current progress we're making on Serverpod. Several apps are already being built with Serverpod. Some of these are already in production. So the code is very much working and stable, but there may be some sharp corners, especially when it comes to the documentation and the lack of tutorials. This is of course something we will address with the final release. Have you ever had to sift through endless server logs or try to read the logs you just spent 20 minutes figuring out how to download from your database? I've been there, and one thing it isn't is fun. It takes lots of time and it sucks the soul out of you. For the final 1.0 Serverpod release, we are building a companion app. This will be a game changer when you're debugging your server. It allows insights into your server while it's running, and it even makes it possible to change runtime settings without a restart. The companion app is not yet available for download, but I'm thrilled to show a demo for the very first time. At the heart of the companion app is its log viewer. It allows you to quickly pinpoint errors in your code. If you open up the log settings, you can specify exactly what you want to be logged. You can set the log level or choose to only log calls that results in errors or are slow to execute. But that's not all. You can even change settings for a specific endpoint or a specific method. For example, if you find a particular method to be slow, you can turn on logging for just that single method to capture more data about what's going on. Serverpod logs the calls to your server and other types of sessions, like future calls. If your code throws an exception, it will be automatically logged together with its stack trace. The companion app will show a simplified version of the stack trace and link you back to your code with a single click. What's even cooler is that turning on logging for database queries will store the query's execution time and the stack trace for where the query was made. A common cause for a server method to be slow is that it makes a slow database query. The companion app makes it super easy to find these slow queries, to review the details and link them straight back to your code. What used to be hours of work is just a few clicks within the companion app. That's what we call world-class logging. Finally, I want to thank all of you who support this project in one way or another. Thanks for trying out Serverpod, giving us feedback, contributing code, or just following us on Twitter and cheering us on. We've got some incredible feedback from the community, and it's very inspiring to hear how excited you are about Serverpod. On the Serverpod team, we still have room for one more co-founder. We think you are a very strong Dart developer or great at making explainer videos and programming tutorials, a bit like this video. If that's the case, you should definitely get in touch with us. We're based in Stockholm, Sweden, but the world is our playground. You'll get to work with some of the world's top Dart and Flutter developers and build something that hundreds of thousands of programmers will use in the future. And of course, you'll get to work with me. There's a link in the description below if you're interested. If you want to follow our Serverpod journey, make sure to subscribe. More updates will be coming. We're also somewhat active on Twitter, though we spend most of our time coding. But when something happens, we'll post there for sure. Also, feel free to post questions in the comments. I'll try to make a follow-up video with answers if we get anything interesting there. And as always, happy coding and go check out serverpod.dev if you haven't already.